The sun burned hot on the pavement as I set up my lemonade stand, same as always. My hands shook a little as I unfolded the sign I made last night with Mom's old markers. The letters were big and bright, just like she said they should be. But my stomach twisted when I saw the words again. Lemonade for chemo. I swallowed hard and pushed the thought away. I wasn't here to feel sorry for myself. I was here to sell. The first few minutes were always the hardest. People walked by, glancing at me, then looking away fast like they didn't want to see. Like if they ignored me, I'd disappear. I didn't blame them. It's easier not to see things that make you feel bad. Then, finally, an older man in a blue cap stopped. He pulled out a wrinkled dollar. "1 cup, please." I smiled big, trying to look like any other kid running a lemonade stand, not a kid fighting something I didn't want to talk about. I poured the cup carefully, handed it to him, and took the dollar. One step closer. "Good luck, kid," he said, then walked off. I let out a breath. One sale down. 1,000,000 to go. A little girl ran up next, tugging on her mom's hand. She had curly brown hair and bright eyes. "Mommy, can I have some?" Her mom hesitated. She looked at my sign. I saw her read the words and press her lips together. I knew that look. Pity. I hated it. But then, she knelt beside her daughter and whispered something in her ear. The little girl smiled and ran up to me, holding out a $5 bill. "Keep the change," she said. I stared. $5. That was 5 cups worth. "Are you sure?" I asked. The mom nodded. "You're doing something important." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded back and handed the little girl her lemonade. She took a sip and giggled. "This is really good." My chest felt warm, and for a moment, I forgot about everything else. More people came and went. Some bought lemonade. Some just smiled. A few dropped money in my jar without even taking a cup. It wasn't much, but every little bit counted. Then, as I refilled my pitcher, a shadow fell over the stand. I looked up. A man in a sharp black suit stood there, staring at my sign. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but his face was unreadable. "How much for the whole thing?" he asked. I froze. The whole what? The stand. Everything. How much? My hands gripped the counter. No one had ever asked that before. Was this guy serious? I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick stack of bills. And then, without another word, he dropped it onto the counter. My heart pounded. People around us stopped talking, stopped walking. Everything felt frozen. I couldn't breathe. I had no idea who this man was. But I knew one thing. This was just the beginning. The money sat on my counter, crisp bills stacked, so high they almost tipped over. I didn't touch it. I barely breathed. The man in the black suit stood completely still, his face unreadable behind his dark sunglasses. "How much?" he asked again, his voice calm, almost too calm. I swallowed hard. I don't know. The truth was, I had never thought about selling my stand. It wasn't just a table with lemonade. It was my fight, my way of doing something, anything to help Mom with the medical bills. Without it, what did I have? The man tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out even more money. He didn't count it, just placed it neatly on top of the stack. People walking by had started to notice. Some slowed down, whispering. A few took out their phones like they were recording. A woman passing by stopped and stared. "Are you serious right now?" she asked the man. He didn't even look at her. I tried to find my voice. "Why do you want my stand?" The man finally smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just the kind that barely lifts the corner of your mouth. "I like lemonade," he said. I blinked. That couldn't be the real reason. But before I could say anything, he reached for his sunglasses and pulled them off. And that's when I realized why everyone around me had gone completely silent. I had seen that face before. On TV, on the internet, on the news. It was Elon Musk. The Elon Musk. My heart felt like it stopped. My mouth went dry. The lady next to me gasped. "No way." A guy behind her whispered, "Is that really him?" I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Elon Musk was standing in front of my lemonade stand. And I had no idea why. "Still don't know how much?" he asked. His voice was casual, like he was just making small talk. I finally snapped out of my shock. I looked down at the money, then back at him. I wasn't planning on selling it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Elon nodded like he expected that answer. He slid his hands into his pockets. "All right, then let's make a deal. My fingers tightened around the counter. What kind of deal? He glanced at the sign I had made. The one with the words I almost didn't write because I was afraid people would look at me differently. Lemonade for chemo. He read it again, then looked me straight in the eyes. I'll buy every cup you have, he said, but I want you to keep selling. I blinked. You want to buy all my lemonade, but you still want me to sell it? He nodded. That's right. I had no idea what that meant. No idea what he was planning. But something about the way he said it made me believe this was bigger than lemonade, and that whatever was about to happen next, I'd never forget it. I stared at Elon Musk, his words still hanging in the air. He had just told me he wanted to buy all my lemonade, but still wanted me to sell it. It didn't make any sense. People around us had stopped moving. A few cars slowed down, drivers peeking out their windows. Whispers spread through the small crowd that had gathered. Is this a joke? Someone muttered. He's actually talking to the kid, another whispered. I swallowed hard. My hands gripped the edge of my stand. You really want to buy all of it? I asked. Elon nodded. Every cup. I glanced at my pitcher. It wasn't much, maybe a dozen cups left. Even if he paid a lot, it wouldn't make that big of a difference in the long run. Unless. How much? I asked. My voice came out shakier than I wanted. Elon pulled out his wallet. How much do you usually charge? I hesitated. 50 cents a cup. He pulled out a $100 bill and placed it on the counter. That should cover it. $100. For a pitcher of lemonade. My chest tightened. That was more than I usually made in a whole weekend. My mom could buy medicine with that. I reached for the bill, but Elon placed his hand over mine. His grip was firm, not rough, but enough to make me pause. That's not the real offer, he said. I looked up at him. His expression was serious now. No small smiles, no teasing. I pulled my hand back. What do you mean? Elon straightened up, hands slipping into his pockets. I want to do something bigger than just buying lemonade, he said. But I need to know if you're willing to take a risk. A risk. That word sat heavy in my chest. I had already taken a risk starting this stand in the first place, putting myself out here, letting people know what I was going through. But this was different. I don't understand, I admitted. Elon nodded like he expected that. Let me ask you this, he said. Why did you start selling lemonade? I felt my face heat up. The question was simple, but I still hesitated. I glanced at the sign I had made, the words staring back at me. For my chemo, I said. For my hospital bills. Elon tilted his head. You could have just asked people for donations. But instead, you decided to sell something. Why? I bit my lip. I had never really thought about it like that. I didn't want to just ask for money, I finally said. I wanted to earn it. Elon's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. He leaned forward slightly. That's what I thought, he said. A silence passed between us. Around us, people kept whispering, but I barely heard them. Then Elon pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. He turned it toward me. This is my Twitter, he said. I frowned, confused. Okay. He smiled. I'm about to post about your lemonade stand. My stomach flipped. What? Elon held up a finger, signaling me to wait. He typed something quickly, then turned the screen back toward me. I read the words out loud under my breath. Just met a kid selling lemonade to pay for his chemo. Buying out his whole stand, but that's not enough. Let's make this big. Who's in? I barely had time to process what that meant before he hit post. Then he looked at me. Now we wait. I had no idea what was about to happen. But deep down I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. I watched Elon Musk put his phone back in his pocket like he had just sent a normal text. Like he hadn't just posted about my lemonade stand to millions of people. My heart pounded so hard I could hear in my ears. The sun felt hotter, the air heavier. I tried to act normal, but my hands were shaking. People around us kept whispering. Some had their phones out, scrolling, checking. I didn't have a phone, but I knew what was happening. The tweet was spreading. A man in a gray hoodie jogged over from the sidewalk. He was already holding his phone up, recording. Hey kid, he said out of breath. You're the one Elon Musk just tweeted about. I opened my mouth, but my voice didn't come out right away. I had to clear my throat. Yeah, I said. The man grinned. Dude, that's insane. You're gonna go viral. Viral. I had heard the word before, usually about funny videos or famous people. But this was different. A car pulled up to the curb. The driver rolled down his window. Hey, is this the lemonade stand? Another person walked up. Then another. More phones. More talking. It was like a switch had flipped, and suddenly, my tiny stand on the corner wasn't tiny anymore. I turned to Elon. What do I do? He smirked. Keep selling. I looked at my pitcher. I barely had any lemonade left. Panic rose in my chest. I'm almost out. Elon just nodded. Then we need more. I didn't even have time to think before things got even crazier. A black SUV pulled up, and two men in fancy suits stepped out. One of them looked around like he was checking for something. The other walked straight up to Elon and whispered in his ear. Elon nodded. Already taken care of. Taken care of? What did that mean? I was about to ask when my mom's car skidded into the parking lot across the street. She jumped out, her face pale, eyes wide. She spotted me, and in 3 seconds, she was at my side. Daniel, what is going on? I had never seen her this panicked before. Not even at the hospital. I started, but I didn't know how to explain. Elon turned to her and held out his hand. Ma'am, I'm Elon. Your son is an incredible entrepreneur. Mom stared at him, then at me. Elon, as in, I nodded quickly. The Elon. She pressed a hand to her forehead like she was dizzy. I was at work, and someone came running in, saying my son was trending on Twitter. I thought. She shook her head. I don't know what I thought. I didn't either. But I knew one thing. This wasn't slowing down. A red sports car pulled up, and a woman in sunglasses stepped out. She was holding a giant bag. When she reached us, she unzipped it and pulled out lemons. A whole bag of them. I saw the tweet, she said breathlessly. Figured you'd need more. Then another man walked up. He had a grocery bag full of sugar. And then another. Someone with a cooler full of ice. Someone else with cups. People weren't just buying lemonade. They were helping me make it. Mom covered her mouth with both hands. I saw tears in her eyes, but she wasn't crying from sadness. It was something else. Hope. Elon clapped a hand on my shoulder. Told you. This isn't just about lemonade. I realized then that he was right. This was bigger. Bigger than me, bigger than my little stand. And it was only getting started. The air buzzed with voices, laughter, and the clinking of ice cubes in cups. My tiny lemonade stand had turned into something I never imagined. People weren't just buying lemonade anymore. They were a part of it. Helping. Smiling. Talking. Someone had brought a folding table and set it up next to mine. Another person set up a second cooler filled with fresh lemonade. I wasn't making the lemonade anymore. Other people were, and I was just handing out cups. A woman holding a microphone stepped through the crowd. A cameraman followed close behind. She was from the news. Daniel, she said, kneeling to my level. Can we ask you a few questions? I blinked. Me? She smiled. You're the kid who started all of this, aren't you? I swallowed hard. I guess so. Mom stepped closer, placing a hand on my back. I could feel her warmth, steady and safe. The reporter's microphone hovered near my mouth. What made you start selling lemonade? I glanced at my sign. Even though the words were simple, they were still hard to say out loud. For my chemo, I said, to help my mom with the bills. The reporter's face softened. And did you ever expect something like this to happen? I shook my head fast. No way. The crowd laughed, and for a second I did too. The reporter turned toward Elon Musk. And you? Why did you decide to help? Elon slipped his hands into his pockets. Because this kid isn't just asking for help. He's working for it. My cheeks burned. I wasn't used to so many people looking at me, listening to me. Then, in the middle of all of it, Mom's phone rang. She frowned and pulled it out of her pocket. Hello. The noise around us kept going, but something about the way she stiffened made my stomach drop. Yes, this is his mother, she said, her voice suddenly quiet. I looked up at her. Mom. She didn't answer, just listened. Then, slowly, she pressed a hand to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. But this time, I didn't know if they were happy tears or something else. I grabbed her sleeve. Mom, what is it? She lowered the phone and turned to me. Her lips trembled like she couldn't get the words out. Then, finally, she whispered, It's the hospital. I felt a chill race down my spine. The hospital. Mom took a shaky breath. Then she knelt in front of me, cupping my face in her hands. They just told me, she swallowed hard. Daniel, someone paid for your entire treatment. The world went silent. I barely heard the people around us. I barely felt the hot sun or the sweat on my forehead. All I heard were her words. Someone paid for my treatment. All of it. I shook my head, trying to understand. But who? Mom looked at Elon Musk, and he just smiled. That was the moment I knew. Nothing would ever— The words felt like they were floating in the air, just out of reach. Someone paid for my entire treatment. It didn't make sense. It didn't feel real. Mom still had the phone pressed to her ear, nodding, listening, but I barely heard what she was saying. My head felt light, like I was floating. People around us had gone quiet. Even the reporters, even the strangers holding their phones, even the ones still waiting in line for lemonade. They were all staring, waiting just like me. Mom finally lowered the phone, blinking fast like she was trying not to cry. She looked at me, then at Elon Musk. "It was you, wasn't it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elon just shrugged. "What can I say? I like lemonade." I felt my knees wobble. "You really paid for everything?" He nodded. "Every last cent." I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. It was too big, too impossible. Mom let out a shaky breath. Then suddenly, she grabbed me, pulling me into the tightest hug I'd ever felt. The crowd around us exploded into cheers, clapping, whistles. Someone even yelled, "Let's go." But I couldn't hear any of it. All I could feel was Mom's arms around me, her heartbeat against my cheek, the way her whole body shook as she held me. I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't want her to let go, because if she did, maybe I'd wake up and this would all be a dream. But when she finally pulled back, everything was still there. The people, the lemonade stand, the $100 bill still sitting on my counter, and Elon Musk smiling like he had just done something completely normal. I wiped my eyes fast, embarrassed. I don't even know what to say. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Just keep going." I frowned. "Keep going?" Elon leaned against the table. "You started this stand to pay for your chemo. But now that's covered. So what are you going to do next?" I blinked. I hadn't thought about that. Selling lemonade had always been about survival, about fighting for something I needed. But now I didn't need it. I glanced at the people still standing in line. Some were kids. Some were older. Some were moms like mine. Some looked rich. Some didn't. But every single one of them was here for the same reason. They wanted to help. The thought hit me like a wave. What if— I hesitated, then looked up at Elon. What if I kept selling lemonade, but not for me? Elon raised an eyebrow. "Go on." I took a deep breath. What if I used the money to help other kids? Kids like me? For the first time since I met him, Elon actually looked surprised. But only for a second. Then he grinned. "That," he said, "is a genius idea." The people around us started murmuring, then clapping, then cheering again. Mom squeezed my shoulder, her eyes shining. "Daniel, are you sure?" I nodded. "I know what it feels like to need help. And now, I want to help other kids." Elon laughed. "See? I told you this wasn't just about lemonade." And that was the moment I realized something. This wasn't just a lemonade stand anymore. This was something bigger, something that could change lives. And it had all started with one cup. I thought the biggest moment of my life had already happened. I thought nothing could top Elon Musk buying my lemonade, paying for my treatment, and turning my little stand into something bigger than I ever imagined. I was wrong, because what happened next changed everything. The moment I said I wanted to help other kids, something shifted in the air. People weren't just clapping anymore. They were looking at each other, nodding, whispering, like something had clicked in their minds. Then someone in the crowd shouted, "I want to help too." It was a woman holding her daughter's hand. The little girl had no hair, just like I had no hair. I didn't have to ask to know why. The woman smiled at me. "My daughter, Lily, is fighting leukemia. If you're starting something to help kids like her, I want to be part of it." I felt something swell on my chest, so big it almost hurt. Then another voice rang out. "I'll donate $100 right now." "Me too. I've got 500. I'll match whatever Elon gave." The crowd was shifting, buzzing, growing bigger. People weren't just watching anymore, they were part of it. Mom's phone dinged, then dinged again, and again. She frowned and pulled it out, her eyes widening as she stared at the screen. "Oh my," she whispered. I peeked at her phone. My heart stopped. The donations. They were coming in. Fast. I turned to Elon, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you do this?" He smirked. "Nope. You did." I shook my head. "But I didn't ask." You didn't have to. He crossed his arms. People don't just want to give money. They want to be part of something real. And you, kid, are as real as it gets. I swallowed hard. This was bigger than I thought. Mom grabbed my arm gently, her fingers shaking. Daniel, she whispered, look. She turned her phone toward me. It wasn't just donations. It was messages. Hundreds of them. From parents. From kids. From people I had never met. Some were thanking me. Some were asking for help. And some were offering it. One message stood out. A doctor from a children's hospital in another state. He said he had seen my story. That he wanted to talk. My hand started shaking. Mom, what is happening? She let out a shaky laugh. I think you just started something really, really big. Elon's phone buzzed. He checked it, then raised an eyebrow. Daniel, he said, how do you feel about going on TV? I nearly dropped my lemonade cup. TV. Yep. He showed me the screen. Good Morning America wants to interview you. My stomach flipped. This wasn't just a lemonade stand anymore. This was something else. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for. But I knew one thing. I wasn't doing this alone. I looked at Lily, the little girl holding her mom's hand. Then at the crowd. The donations. The messages. This was more than money. This was a mission. I thought it would be just one interview. One TV show. A few more donations. I had no idea it was only the beginning. The morning of the interview, my stomach was in knots. Mom helped me fix my shirt for the 100th time, brushing invisible dust off my shoulders. I knew she was just as nervous as I was. Are you ready? She asked, her voice soft. No, not even a little. But I nodded anyway. Yeah. Elon Musk was waiting outside the hotel. He had flown us out to New York himself. When we got into the car, he glanced at me and smirked. You look like you're about to pass out. I feel like I might. He laughed. You'll be fine. I wasn't so sure. The moment we stepped into the TV studio, everything felt too big. The cameras, the lights, the people rushing around, checking microphones and fixing their earpieces. I felt tiny. Then the host walked up, smiling. Daniel, we are so excited to have you here. I shook her hand, trying to smile back. Thanks for having me. She led us to the stage, and suddenly I was sitting in front of camera. The lights felt hot. The microphone on my shirt felt too heavy. My heartbeat felt too loud. Then the cameras started rolling. The host turned to me. Daniel, let's start with the question everyone is asking. How did a 9-year-old boy turn a simple lemonade stand into a nationwide movement? I hesitated. I hadn't thought of it like that before. I glanced at Mom, then at Elon. Then I looked at the camera, and I told my story. I talked about the hospital, the bills, the way Mom had been working so hard, trying to keep up. I talked about the lemonade stand, how it started with just a few cups, a handwritten sign, and a dream. I talked about Elon Musk stopping by, about the moment everything changed. And then I talked about what came next, about the kids, the parents, the donations, the messages, about Lily, the little girl I met at my stand, who was still fighting, about the kids I hadn't met yet, who needed help, and about how I wasn't going to stop. By the time I finished talking, the host wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes were shining, her voice softer. Daniel, do you realize what you started? I thought about that for a second. I had started selling lemonade to save my own life. But now, I was selling lemonade to save others. I met her eyes. I just wanted to help. The interview aired that same day. And by that night, something unbelievable happened. The donations didn't just grow. They exploded. Celebrities shared my story. Schools started hosting lemonade stand in my name. A huge company offered to sponsor me. And then the biggest surprise of all, a hospital reached out. Not just any hospital, one of the biggest children's hospitals in the country. They wanted to start a foundation. In my name. I couldn't believe it. Mom cried when she read the email. I just sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. Daniel, she whispered, this is bigger than anything we could have imagined. Elon sat back, arms crossed, smiling. Told you. A few days later, we stood in front of a giant banner with my name on it. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked questions. I held a giant check. Money that wasn't just for me, but for every kid out there fighting the same battle I was. I took a deep breath, looked at the crowd, and smiled. This wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning. Thank you for listening to another exciting story from VIP Vault. If you have enjoyed listening to this story, Check out our videos here.